We now come to the Q&A session. We have about 25 minutes, 30 minutes of the meeting left before we have to clear the banquet hall. So could I ask the guest speakers, Vice-Chancellor Professor Dawn Freshwater, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Professor Kent Anderson, Guild President Ms Megan Lee, and the University Librarian Jill Ben to join me on stage and take the seats to my left. Now this is obviously something new, and we've done it for a reason. It's always tight on time when we come to the Q&A session, and we were requested if we could look at a question on the notice situation, so we have. We can review after tonight, but we'll certainly progress with it exactly as this tonight. The questions, we've selected 11, and we'll go through those in order. The questions will be on the screen behind you, and the person or persons who will answer the question will be nominated on the screen as well. So question 1 is here. It's from James Rollins to the Vice-Chancellor. So Vice-Chancellor, to you please.
Thanks, Doug. Can I just check the microphone is working sufficiently enough at the back? Can you hear that? Good. Thank you. And thank you for managing this process, Doug, of taking the questions and sifting through them in a way that means that the panel can respond to a number of questions, get through them. So this question, I think, relates directly to the building of Forest Hall. And I won't read the question because you've got it there. But I think the gist of the question is around any further building around Forest Hall. So, and I think there's been some media interest in this as well. When we originally, and I say we, I mean this has been some years in the making now, when we talked about the development of Forest Hall and the donation to the scholarships for the university to the Forest Research Foundation, there was always a design by the architect that involved 2 parts to a building. And that was looked at through the Senate about 2014, 2013 probably, 2 parts to the building at that stage. And what was developed at the time was 1 part of the building with a possibility of developing further. And there were a further 8 rooms that were going to be developed, fondly called the Eastern Block, that weren't actually developed during this process. So we're still in we are in a position where we've got, of course, Forest Hall 1 now complete. There is still on the table the work that the original architect put together. I'm sure many of you will be aware, of course, that sadly Kerry Hill died recently. A very great loss to this state. The architect who put together the design for Forest Hall as a whole, and that does account for 2 parts to that building. So where we're at the moment is we have Forest Hall built. There was scope for extending Forest Hall into more bedrooms and more rooms for scholars, and that is currently continuing to be looked at. And of course, decisions as they go through any process have to require planning, as they always do. And when any planning goes forward, then there's consultation with the community. So that's as much as I can say about that at the moment, because that's as far as the conversation has gone.
Thanks very much, Dawn. Just before I move on to question 2, I will let you know that Collingwood is still leading Richmond by 27 points in the final quarter, so interesting. The second question is asked by Benjamin Fincham de Groot to both the Guild President and the Vice-Chancellor. So perhaps, Megan, if you could take first look at this one, please.
Yes, thank you. Oh, that's loud. So just by way of background, the Australian Human Rights Commission Change the Course report came out of earlier work by the National Union of Students, which was a survey of students regarding sexual assault and harassment on campus and their ability to engage with their education safely. This was then obviously on a smaller scale, and then was picked up by Universities Australia and the AHRC to do a nationwide survey into this issue as well. And it was very telling, I suppose, of particularly the biggest problem is that most students don't know where to go if something like that happens to them. They don't know where to get support from, they don't know if their university can do anything about it, and they just don't really know where to start if something like that happens. In terms of what we've done as a guild, out of the review of orientation in 2013, we have significantly overhauled all of our event management processes, the way that we manage clubs and societies, and the way that we manage all student-run initiatives and events. This includes a series of trainings, student leadership training sessions that we require all clubs to take. It's only prescriptive that one person from their executive takes it, but we find that we're having to put on more sessions as every single member of a club that is on that club committee will attend those sessions. That covers everything from preventing sexual violence at events, the responsible management of alcohol, and how to run events safely and inclusively. We also provide special training to our student representatives. That was a new initiative I started this year, that key student leaders were getting disclosure training so that they could appropriately support students who were seeking that support and didn't know where to go. We've been working with the university on improving lighting on campus, as well as security services, as I mentioned earlier, like the text message service, as well as working with UWA security to increase and reform the training that security guards offer so that it's a bit more inclusive of all the different kinds of students they might encounter, as well as working with the university on developing a UWA-specific respectful behaviour unit, tying into all the university policies that set the expectations of what it means to be a UWA student and the behaviour that this institution expects of our students. And we also launched the Be a Better Human campaign, which was developed by the Flinders University and their student union in collaboration to combat everything from, it's an educational campaign and challenges people to reevaluate their conceptions of, for example, what is sexual assault and harassment, what is inappropriate conduct, what is rape culture, those kinds of things that women's officers for decades at the Guild and other student organisations have been trying to make some ground on. So we've launched that, as well as a number of different services like the Ask for Angela program in our tavern, where if a student is feeling unsafe, they can go to any of the bar staff or security staff and ask for Angela, and someone will assist them to get home safely. So that's a number of things that we're doing. We're looking at actually stealing an idea from the libraries. The libraries have a Please Assist Me service, or PAM, and we're looking at doing PAM at events. So you can text PAM and someone with mental health emergency training will come and find you at an event and support you. So it's a little bit more, I guess, catered to what might be happening to that student, as opposed to just, getting them home in a taxi safely as well. So those are some of the things that the Guild is doing that we have direct control over, obviously, because clubs and societies and student culture is our business. It's what we do best, and we're always trying to improve it where we can.
Thanks very much. I should just add that Megan does attend our council meetings each month and gives very full reports and is very open with us, and we've appreciated that openness throughout the year. Dawn, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, Megan's done an excellent job. I would just say that before the Change the Course report came out, the university pulled together with the president of the Student Guild and the colleges who are represented in this work as well, the colleges, the Student Guild, and a group of our own staff working together in advance of the Change the Course report coming out, a piece of work which really was very thorough. And out of the Respect Now Always campaign, the Universities Australia, of course, have committed to a number of reporting actions on an annual basis. We have just passed the 12-month deadline and reported on that. But more importantly, actually, I think what Megan's pointing to are a number of things. And Megan spoke about the GO8 advocacy group earlier. Having the GO8 student advocacy group is really important, more now than it has been in the past. The students are facing significantly different and additional pressures to those that they have in the past. Megan spoke about mental health. I know the question was about sexual assault, but these things are actually all bound up. There's a whole set of things that really we have to work together on. I have to commend the Student Guild on working so collaboratively and collegiately with the university and the colleges on this particular initiative. I would just take issue with the question. And, you know, we've just had a fantastic presentation from our librarian who reminded us that it's very important to look at facts and evidence. We're a university after all. I'm not sure that we could really say that there is a rape culture present on our campus. So I'm just going to pose back to Benjamin, who's not here, I understand, is in Queensland. I think that's the case.
Offshore.
Offshore.
Yeah.
So I just would put back, and you know, I'm sure Megan would have something to say about this, but I'm not just going to let that go unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Megan. The third question. I think perhaps best straight to you, Jill, and I think partly already answered, but would you like to add to what you've said in terms of the value of print and so on?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I've covered it. I mean, I can't really imagine relying solely on a digital library either, and certainly the university hasn't burnt or shredded any books. But I think what's important, I think one of the things we have to recognise is there are treasures to be found through the digitisation of our collections. You know, there's a great story in the US from a student at a university who accessed ProQuest historical newspapers. So he was looking through some newspapers that had been digitised, and through the development of an algorithm, he established that Walt Whitman had written a number of articles under a pseudonym. And he was able to do that because those newspapers were in digital format, and you know, he was able to develop an algorithm based on his writing. So I think, you know, what we have to recognise is that the digital library affords us many opportunities that a print library cannot. I mean, it does mean we still need to be respectful of our special print books, as I've talked about, but we do also need to recognise what the future holds and what the opportunities are.
Thanks very much, Jill. No, very well said.
Doug, can I just add to that? I just think one of the things I might say in addition to that is, of course, as soon as we start to digitise and make not just books but artefacts more broadly available, we're actually expanding their access and enhancing the opportunity for people who've never had opportunities and who haven't had the privileged opportunity to go through education like we have to access those materials. And so, you know, I can understand that there are concerns from the person who's put the question together, but actually this is also about really being aligned with our mission and vision as a university.
Thanks, Dawn. Look, the fourth one is topical given some recent events, and it didn't nominate, but perhaps, Dawn, given you and the Chancellor recently responded, maybe you would, or spoke about this, maybe you'd like to make a response, and Megan, perhaps you would like to as well.
Sure, thanks, Doug. Now, there's a lot we could say about this. So I'll start by where I ended, really, which was last evening with Dan Tehan. Dan Tehan, the new Minister for Education, made a comment yesterday when he was interviewed on 2GB by Alan Jones around freedom of speech. And it's one of the things that he raised with the group of 8 Vice-Chancellors last evening. And his concern is that there is a concern about a sort of US phenomena infiltrating Australian universities. We had quite a heated debate about that last evening in terms of freedom of speech. I would just remind us that the role of the university is not the same as the role of the academics within the university. In other words, what I'm really saying there is freedom of speech is not the same as academic freedom. Now, we've had a wonderful opportunity presented to us in the university by recent events for calling of an extraordinary academic board where we were able to really have a very thought-provoking and provocative debate amongst our academics around the notion of freedom of speech, the role of the university in that regard, and academic freedom and the role of academics in that regard. And to that end, we've agreed that we will, as a university, take a lead for the nation on developing a statement, not simply mimicking the Chicago statement, or indeed mimicking the Oxford statement or any other statement that's been developed, but really working together. And Megan, who unfortunately has been quite unwell for the last 3 weeks, and she did a great job here tonight given that she's had quite a serious cough and cold and a chest infection, was not able to attend that academic board, but was very well represented by the Student Guild. And what we've decided to do is pull together a working group to really pull information around a statement for the university in terms of our position on this, and we're sharing that currently with Universities Australia and the GOH as we go through this process. Now, in addition, we're very fortunate to have a very engaged Chancellor in this regard. So if you read the Australian, you will have heard that this week he was in Darwin and he gave a speech at the Austin Oration, try saying that, and he gave a speech on freedom of speech. And he used some interesting case law, and that was condensed and put into the Australian this week, and we have actually circulated a copy of his speech. So he's also very engaged in this and has quite interesting views in this regard. So from a university point of view, what it's, and I think we have to think about the opportunity that we have here for us to really work together, again, through Convocation, through the Student Guild, and through our alumni and through our national standing, to really take a lead in terms of determining how we go forward, because it's not just this university that is having challenges around a number of issues related to freedom of expression, academic freedom, and a whole range of other contentious challenges, one of which is this. What happens, as it has happened in the US, when in order to have somebody speak on campus, the security that's required brings forward a bill of $3 million. And one of the questions that's been raised this week is, who pays the costs? And it was one of the questions that we were asking. So this is a very complex issue, and not one that we can get right every time, and not one that we can always understand the complexity of what's happening, even within our own classrooms when people are engaged in lectures, let alone outside on the campus and beyond. So I'm sure Megan will have some things to say about that, and the Student Guild have been heavily involved in working with us through the Extraordinary Academic Board process.
Yes, so I suppose just to touch on my traditionally left-wing agenda, I suppose I always see the role of the Guild is that every student has the right to feel safe and respected. Where any speaker that is to come to this university may seek to harm our students, the Guild will always be there to stand up for them, to speak for them, to amplify their voices and their concerns. When it comes to, I guess, the Guild's position on these things, the Guild encourages freedom of speech. We very much, we've investigated some principles of free speech, engaging with Academic Board and the university on this topic, because we are an internationally recognised research-led institution. The Guild is made up of those fantastic students that are, the future of not only Australia but this world. They are very smart people. They, I guess the Guild's position on the most recent issue was, as a result of these students synthesising that information and deciding it was archaic and outdated and that it would not be appropriate to have that at this university. But definitely moving forward, there needs to be a wider discussion about where this university stands in terms of finding the balance between encouraging speech, encouraging the freedom of speech, the discussion of ideas where it is respectful and where it is constructive. I think the most important thing is that there should always be something good that comes out of those debates. There always should be a way that we all together move forward from those discussions and those debates, and we learn something new and we challenge our own thoughts and ideas. And that's definitely the Guild's position on that, and we are very excited to work closely with the university. And the Vice-Chancellor mentioned that I was represented very well by who is thankfully the next Guild President. So I'm sure that those conversations will be very productive moving forward.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Dawn. Look, I've been caught by the next one. Ray, thanks for the question. The question is about questions on notice as opposed to the ability to fix the question at any time. And Ray, I thank you for your commendation, really, of the quality of the meetings that are held as ordinary meetings and what goes into them. Certainly, in terms of this process, it is the intent to have no spontaneous questions, but I will certainly be around. I'm sure the other panellists will be around for a while afterwards. But the half-year gap is the interesting one. If you look at what we covered in strategy earlier, we recognise the value of the network that we have out there. And I think it's important that we become better as Convocation Council in tapping into that network for various issues. We talk about pulling together small panels on various things, and that's exactly the way to go about it. So I commend you, Ray, for asking the question, and certainly it is well and truly in mind. And that's pretty well also what was covered in your second question about the background research. Well, we've mentioned that we were struggling with the statute review in terms of the team that we had on council, but we had access to great members of Convocation who we could call on, and they were really able to add to our armoury in terms of addressing that sort of thing. So yes, we're aware of it. We're conscious of time on a night like this. I know my phone tells me we've got 6 minutes left, so I'll keep moving so we can have some other questions. But yes, very conscious of that. We'll ask. From Joan Pope to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Ken.
It's addressed to me, but we have the Vice-Chancellor here as well, so I'll start off, and then if I leave anything out, the Vice-Chancellor can step in. First, thank you, Joan, very much for the question. Of course, Shenton House is currently occupied, and so there are people in Shenton House. And also, you'll recall from the last ordinary meeting, we're on a campus master plan looking at how the entire campus and indeed all of the assets of the university are used. But I do have to thank you for showing me that our heritage is displayed across the campus already. Indeed, you took me through the displays in the Irwin Street building. We heard earlier about how Winthrop Hall is used for displays. And if you go into the refectory, the photos that are exhibited there as well. So there is an idea of distributing it, having such a broad campus and having that access. And another one that pops to mind is the School of Anatomy's building and how they've got their history and their heritage displayed throughout it. So I'm going to pause to say there's a plan going on. I'm going to pause to say there's people already in Shenton House, but I'm going to thank you for showing me where all of that heritage is already displayed in a distributed manner.
Do you want to add?
I think, given we're short of time, don't we?
Okay, the next question from Pauline Tremlett, either Dawn or Kemp. Maybe Dawn, you take this one.
But actually, if I may, I might handball this over to you, Warden. One, it was a Warden email, or it was a Convocation email, and I think you've already addressed it in your comments.
Certainly in terms much for Vice Chancellor and Guild President related to overseas students. Obviously, very important to the university, and an interesting question.
So I'll start with that first point, talking as I did earlier about evidence. So let me just start with that first point where it says a lot of our fundings come from overseas students. So this university has actually one of the lowest numbers of overseas students, international students, and is certainly at the bottom of the group of 8 in that regard. And in Western Australia, we are trending very much below the national average, and we continue to trend down. And we saw a decrease again this year in Western Australia in our international students. So I think I just want to be clear about the numbers. So in this university, we have around 19 to 20% international students at any one time. There are universities in Australia that are upwards of 38 to 40% international students. If you're interested to know that 19 to 20%, when you break it down, it actually is not dominated, which is often the case in many universities. It's thought about by a particular cohort of students from China. So I think let's just put that in context, because actually for us, a lot of our funding does not come from our overseas students. And that's one of the things for us that is a struggle, because for many other universities, they are able to generate a lot more income from international students, which they reinvest into research, because as you know, research is not funded fully through the government. So let me just put that in the context, because I don't think we can accept the premise of the question. So those overseas students' parents would not be happy to see UWA campus turned into a place that fosters socialism. Well, I can't speak for the parents, actually, but what I can speak for is our own comments earlier around the importance of having a campus that is very well balanced in terms of its acceptance of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and at the same time ensuring that we protect, for example, privacy of individuals, confidentiality, all the things that Megan talked about. So I think that's what we're trying to work on at the moment, and to move within that space. Megan, I don't know if you want to address this.
Yeah, the only thing I probably would add is that in terms of, we have 187 affiliated societies. One of them is the UWA Socialist Alternative Club, as well as UWA Liberal Club, UWA Labour Club, but actually the largest club on campus is the Multicultural Students Union. It is the largest club and the most active club, closely followed by the Electronic Music Appreciation Society. So in terms of the Socialist Alternative Club dominating the campus, I tried to do a little bit of research. As far as I'm aware, they have not actually applied for any student services and amenities fees funding through the Guild. The Guild does provide close to $1 million of club funding to our student-led clubs and societies. That is, their own money that they pay for the student services and amenities fee, 50% of which the Guild gets. And from my memory, they haven't applied for very much, if any, this year. So just to make a comment on that particular club or those students dominating campus, it would actually see that our campus is a very multicultural campus, with MSU being the largest club.
Thanks, Lee. Well, and right on day 25, I will take the next one. It was about the article published in the Post, and the questions that relate to that are on the next slide. So was Convocation aware? Yes, we were, because your President Megan reported at one of the meetings that she was aware of it. And certainly that was about as far as we went. So there was no approach to Convocation to do anything about it. And I know that there has been good, strong work within the university to look at just that issue. So it's not really the sort of thing that Convocation can easily deal with. And as I said, my phone tells me it's now 8:26, and I said I would try to make sure that we had finished by 8:30 tonight. If I flick through and you don't see those, we can go to the closing remark. It's awkward for the club if we go over time, and I think we have to respect Anderson. Kent's been there for several years now, and I know that Warren certainly appreciated working with him as warden, and I the same. And I think it's appropriate that given Kent leaves UWA at the end of the year, that he should be able to make a closing remark, which isn't necessarily the last remark, but Kent, I'd just hand to you briefly.
Thank you very much, Doug, but thank you, friends. Thank you, graduates. Just 4 quick points. The first one is, when I first came onto this beautiful spot where we are right now, I was actually first met at the boat shed by Dr. Richard Wally, the Whadjuk elder, who took me onto this beautiful country, and we walked all the way down to Pelican Point, and it really gave me the initial appreciation. But since that time, at least 4 times a year, and more likely 6 times a year, I've enhanced that local knowledge with Lady Jean Brodie Hall. And Lady Jean's there in the back. She's now ducking a little bit. But Lady Jean and I have taken a certain bit of the campus on each one of those, and I've been able to see the campus through her eyes and bring that legacy onto the executive through the opportunities provided by that campus plan that the Vice Chancellor mentioned. Third thing I do want to mention is thank you to Doug and to Warren for the friendship that they've shown and the leadership that they've shown as wardens, but the friendship to me personally. And the fourth and final one is thank you to this collection. Convocation, of course, is a meeting, and it's a wonderful meeting of people, and I'll just end with a great story. Last night, I was doing the reading at Evensong up in the chapel in St. George's, and someone came up to me, and I have to confess I didn't recognize the face immediately, and they said, Kent, how you doing? I remember from the Convocation open meeting that we met. That's what Convocation's about, that meeting of people in this collection together. So thank you, graduates. Thank you, Warden.